Good.
Does it say 10 yet?
Minutes. Under 2 minutes.
9:58.
They call you at an inopportune time.
Yeah, right. My sister was gonna call that would be.
Loose on that one, huh? Got 10.
At 10, okay. It is 10 o'clock, so we're gonna call the meeting to order. So we are online and Steve Holland is online with us today and he is at 21007 St. Croix Road Southeast in Pine City. So if you're in that area, you can go visit him, and Josh Moore is on an excused absence and he is not with us today. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and if you'd rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the United States. And to the republic for which it stands. Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have time for the public forum. There's nobody in here. Is there anybody online today, Brian? Nobody? Okay. We need a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there any additions or corrections?
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Menke, County Administrator, there are no additions to the agenda.
I'll
I'll move the agenda.
Second.
Sounds good. So we have Steve and we have Matt, and we need to do a roll call vote. So Debbie?
District one, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District three, Commissioner Lundgren.
Yes.
District four, Commissioner Walton.
Yes.
District five, Commissioner Lundgren.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we need a motion to approve the minutes from the August 1st meeting. And the summary of the publication.
I will.
JJ?
I'll second.
Matt? Debbie?
District three, Commissioner Lundgren.
Yes.
District four, Commissioner Walton.
Yes.
District five, Commissioner Lundgren.
Aye.
District one, Chair Holland.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're on to minutes of the boards. We've got reports from the annual disclosure of tax increment districts for years ended in 2022. Sandstone annual disclosure, that was for Pine City Sandstone, and then both of them have tax increment districts for 2022. And the Pine County zoning board minutes from July.
I'll move those.
Matt,
I'll second.
JJ. All right, Matt and JJ.
District four, Commissioner Walton.
Yes.
District five, Commissioner Lundgren.
Aye.
District one, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District three, Commissioner Lundgren. Thank you.
We're on to the consent agenda. Anybody have any questions on the consent agenda, or can we have a motion to accept that?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Matt, Stephen, Matt. Okay.
District five, Commissioner Lundgren.
Aye.
District one, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District three, Commissioner Lundgren.
Yes,
District four, Commissioner Walton.
Yes.
You.
we're on to the regular agenda. So we've got the personnel committee reports. Minutes are attached. Do you want to go through that? Do you want to go through the personnel committee?
I will do personnel.
All right.
So we met on August 7th. The main chunk of business conducted was, I'm sure you read it, the personnel policy. We added the section 21.2.6 to the county policy manual to prohibit the use of all forms of cannabis at county facilities. including office buildings and grounds, public works buildings, and maintenance shops and grounds, recycling solid waste sites, and all similar county-operated grounds and buildings. And then I'll make a motion to approve that, but then I'll have a little bit of discussion after that. if that's-
Okay, so Matt made a motion to approve the change to the personnel policy for the use of cannabis. Can we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Steve. Deb, do you want to do a roll call?
Sure.
District one, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District three, Commissioner Levering.
Yes.
District four, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District five, Commissioner Levering.
All right.
Thank you.
And then just follow up, we've been having pretty good success with hiring people, but we still have open positions. And I'm sure you read this, but I want the public to know, we still have 18 open positions. But we have hired or filled 6 positions. Just want to throw that out there too.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
just to note, those numbers are for July 31st. So it's a
Yeah.
snapshot in time that's as of July 31st.
okay.
And then there's,
I thought, just for my information, aren't we fuller, or have more employees that were hired for correctional officers, so we don't have as many openings there? Jackie?
Yes.
Sorry. That's what you get for sitting in the back of the room.
Jackie Coivisto, Human Resources Manager. Madam Chair, yes, we are down to 3 full-time openings for corrections officers and 3 part-time. So we are very thrilled about that.
That's awesome. So all of the things that we did to get correctional officers in there are working.
I believe so. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, the team has worked very hard. So it is awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
thanks, Jackie.
Did you want to do any more? Any more additions? All right. So that was just informational. So we're good with that, right? Okay, so we're on to the 2024 budget discussion. Ellie.
Ryan's gonna get my PowerPoint brought up. He assures me.
He did. Good job.
You think? All right, so I'm Kelly Schroeder, County Auditor Treasurer, and so I am here today to present to you kind of where we are right now on the 2024 budget. Right now, everyone has submitted their requests of all their hopes and dreams, and we'll kind of go through where we're sitting and what work we have left to do. And then once we're done looking at the county budget as a whole, I will present to you the budgets that I am responsible for in the Auditor Treasurer area. So overall, just a review of the budget process and how we are going to work through this. So at the very top, we're starting today. And then the following next 2 Tuesdays, we do have budget meetings with the departments and some outside entities that will be coming to present budgets to you all. In September, we don't have any specific budget meetings scheduled. However, we have regular board meetings that are, of course, on the calendar where we can discuss the budget. If needed, we can always add budget meetings in September. The key date there, though, is September 30th. We have to have a preliminary budget and levy adopted. And part of that is just a reminder, once we set that preliminary, that's as high as it could be. You can keep it there or you can go down from there for the levy. And then in October, November, depending on how we're sitting, we'll have additional budget meetings and conversations as to what we need to change or do. And then in December, finally, we have our truth and taxation meeting where we present to the public our budget and our levy and how we're going to be using those dollars. And then December 19th is typically that last board meeting in December when you would be adopting the final budget and levy. So I always just like to highlight this because a lot of people like to choose to interchange the words budget and levy. In my mind, they're very different. The budget is how much money is the county spending in total, where the levy is how much of that are we paying for with property tax dollars. So on the chart for all of our different funds, you can see how much total money under the budget category we spent in each of those funds. However, in the far column, then it shows how much of those expenses were actually paid by property tax dollars. So as you can see, it's less than half of our operations are funded by property tax dollars. The rest is funded by fees that we charge, state aids, grants, donations, interest, that type of thing. And I do just have an overview of where 2023 was, where we approved our budget at, in the blue there. And if you have questions as we go, stop me. And then just a reminder on how our budget format looks or works. First, we have our different funds. And so I have all the different funds listed on the slide there. And within the funds then, sometimes there's departments broken down, like in the general fund, there's a lot of departments. You've got all the way from the commissioner's budget to the sheriff's office budget to the attorney. And so those are all separate within the general fund. Some of the other funds, like HHS, only has really 3 departments. Road and Bridge has 4. And so those department heads will go through that. When you get to kind of COVID and down, the fund and the department, there's only 1. But within both of those funds and the departments, as you're drilling down, then you get into these line items. So the line items are what specific items are we spending it on? So you can kind of see my snapshot from the commissioner's budget of the first 2 digits in that account number 01, that means your general fund. And then the next 3 digits are the numbers that represent for the commissioner's department. And then at the far right is the different line items. So we budget for every single one of those items, certain amounts. And so as departments are presenting, as I talk today, I am going to be specifically talking about those individual line items of changes we needed to do with them. And then, of course, there's overall, once you take all those changes in a department, what it ends up to be. Our budget is our best estimate of revenues and expenditures. And some of those things we feel really good about. Some of them we're doing our best, and sometimes there's surprises. On revenues, we think we have a pretty good feel of what county program aid and other aids that are going to be coming in 2024 are going to be. There's been a lot of estimates from the new legislation that came out of these are what the numbers should be. We feel pretty good about them, but yet the state can always make changes until that money's in our bank account. And then reimbursements, that's a really big piece of Health and Human Services. And so Becky, I'm sure we'll talk quite a bit about that. But how much we actually get reimbursed for some of those services we provide can really drive a budget. On expenses, we have wages that are a little bit of a question mark because most of our union contracts are open right now and there's negotiations going on. And so we did our best estimate of what we can afford. And we will see how that works its way through. Health insurance, based on where the fund is going and how our claims have been coming in, we have an insurance meeting coming up, so we'll get actual good numbers, but I feel pretty confident in if we did a 10% health insurance increase, we would be sitting okay with how our self-insurance is working. And then legislative changes is not on your slide. And I laugh a little bit about this one because last Thursday, as I finished this presentation, I'm walking by Cassie, our payroll gal's office, and she just got off a webinar from para learning about the new para requirements. And she's like, this is going to cost the county some money. And I'm like, oh, no. So para previously, if you needed to pay into para, was looked at as an annual amount. Like if you made so much in a year, you had to pay into para. However, now it's changing to a monthly amount. So if you make more than $425 in a month, like many of our temporary workers who currently don't pay into para, they will now have to pay into para, which means the county has to match that. So, and then after I leave Cassie's office, 10 minutes later, here comes Jackie. And Jackie goes, I have bad news. I go, no, I already know about the para change. And she goes, no, not that one. So, and additionally, with these kind of temporary type, very part-time workers, one change that came down is this sick and safe leave, which all of these things are still working through kind of direction. But overall, it allows those employees up to 48 hours a year of paid sick time. That,
No matter how many hours they work?
You have to work,
No, you're fine.
you have to work, I believe it's 80 hours a year, and so virtually
Right.
everyone.
virtually everyone.
So Steve, I don't know if you heard Jackie, she said you have to work 80 hours a year to get that
48
40.
hours of paid sick time. And so, for example, like our transfer station attendants currently don't have any PTO or sick time because we can literally just change the schedule. They have a vacation plan. Or if they call in sick, sometimes our people will just trade and say, okay, if you work today, I'll work next week for you. And so it's worked very well and they haven't really needed this sick time. Now, really, they're going to have 48 hours more of pay. So, and I'm sure there's going to be some other surprises too. Those were just Thursday's surprises when I'm like, all right, we're going to add legislative changes to this slide.
So how many temporary employees do we usually have in a year?
So we typically have 4 household hazardous waste attendants. We have 5 aquatic invasive species folks. Depending on the election year, we might have 2 election staff. And then in other departments, I mean, Becky has some that come and go and depending on needs and grants and things. And I think that's kind of the main places that we use those temp workers.
So overall, it's not a huge budget breaker. In my mind, it's a huge task to keep track of all that, probably more so.
Right. At this point, it's not a huge budget buster, but my Thursday morning last week kind of just proved that when you think you know what happened in the legislation, maybe you don't.
Right.
So there could be more surprises coming. So like this one,
Right.
yeah, it's not going to be a huge financial hit. It is going to change the numbers some, but what else is there?
And Madam Chair, I think what's interesting on these kinds of changes, and Steve, you make the good point, I think, to align with where Kelly is right now in the presentation. We're looking at everything, small numbers overall, but when you drill down to, does that household hazardous waste site cash flow without levy money or not? It may or may not, right? Because that little bit of money in a $50 million budget is a lot of money in a program that is just eking by on fees.
Yeah,
Right.
and you'll see that as I start to present some of my department budgets. I mean, I've got some where it's a $3,000 change and I'll say, well, that's a 56% increase. And you're going to go, what? And it's because those numbers in the individual budgets are so small. So some of these things can make big impacts.
Right.
All right, so for 2024, we have some changes, some good changes, some not so good changes. We'll start with the not so good changes, but I think we were all kind of aware of those. In 2023, to balance the budget, we transferred $621,000-ish from ARPA funds to the general fund. And in my mind, that's a one-time fix. You can't keep doing that. And so that was a hole that we right away knew we'd need to plug. And then, of course, we have the changes due to the Hennepin or Tyler versus Hennepin outcome in that we likely will have no tax forfeit land sale revenue. You know, there's so many questions around that of could we maybe still have timber revenues? And so at this point, my thought would be to just levy it as plan for 0. And if we get something, that'll be a nice surprise. But on the positive side, the legislature this year did some good in our revenues. So we have a new public safety aid of $800,000, and you'll see that showing up some throughout my presentation. And of course, Jeff will be talking about it a lot. That's great. It is a one-time deal for 2024 only. And so it helps us meet some of those things that we no longer have, at least for revenues for this year. Additional probation aid of $463,000. That was some hard fought for money that we put a lot of hours into, but it's come to fruition now. Additional county program aid of $408,000, and then PILT also will be increasing. So overall, when you take the bads to the goods, we're gonna end up about $1.3 million ahead to start with when we go into the 2024 budget. And then we have some major expense changes for 2024. Our wages and benefits are going to be going up almost $2.5 million if you approved everything that's in the budget currently. There's some new staff in the budget. There's some changes from part-time to full-time type things. And you'll get to see those as the departments work through their budgets. But a significant portion of that is just paying for our existing staff and the increases in wages and health insurance. Major equipment purchases. So Mark is proposing that to go up $430,000, and he's got a whole explanation of that you'll hear from Mark. Highway construction, that's really kind of a neutral thing. When you look at the highway budget, you go, oh my gosh, that's increasing a lot. But yes, it's increasing $3.6 million, but so much of that is paid from state aid. So you see that the highway department ebbing and flowing with projects. So that's never anything we get too excited about in highway. The good is Becky and Terry and all of their efforts and the attorney's office, all of their efforts, our out of home placement budget is proposed to go down. So that's always exciting to see, $55,000. So these are just kind of some big changes you'll see departments start to talk about whether they're good, they're bad, they're neutral, just to put them on your radar. Overall, when you look at the 2024 budget, saying all the different funds together, at this point, the revenue side of it is looking like it'll be about $123,000 less than last year. And my chart breaks it down by fund, comparing last year to this year. So the general fund, you see the general fund revenues are going to be are proposed to be higher than last year. But you've got all of those new aids going into the general fund, that public safety aid, the additional probation funding, the additional PILT, the additional county program aid. So we would expect that to be higher in the general fund. HHS is just slightly up as well. And then road and bridge you will see is down. And really that's just a matter of that ebb and flow of construction and sometimes those payments coming before the year to get them started early and things. Road and Bridge does currently in his proposed budget have a $250,000 tax levy increase, which is included in this revenue number. Nowhere else in the budget is there a levy increase included already. So I just wanted to highlight that if you took that levy increase out, then it would be just right about 16 million and it would look like it's even less between 2023 and 2024. The top 10 non-tax general fund revenues, just to give you an idea of where that money in the general fund comes from. Our biggest revenue in the general fund is that county program aid, and you can see last year versus this year. Same with police aid. You see that giant increase for that one-time police public safety aid there. And then of course, PILT as well, you see that increase, our police contracts, probation aid, again, you see that big leap from 2023 to 2024. Interest rates are so much better than a year ago when we were setting our budget. And so I feel very comfortable in saying that we will earn a significant amount of money in interest. Just with how I've been able to put investments in that will be locked in our non-callable for several years. We will have a very nice revenue stream from the interest. E911 is flat. The solid waste assessment, you see that going up slightly. So that's a $10 fee on every improved taxable parcel. You just see that going up because there's been new parcels made, splits, plats, that type of thing. And so when I do that, I rerun the number of how many parcels will this apply to? So it's not that, right. So it's not that because you all would have to change it through a public hearing from $10. And so it hasn't changed from that $10. It's just that there's more parcels that we're levying it against. Penalties and interest remaining stable, and then assessor contracts going down. And I will touch on that when we get to the assessor budget. Expenses, and so my chart shows the three major funds. So as you can see, for general fund and HHS, they're going up, as expected. Road and bridge is going down. You really, they're all to be expected. Road and bridge is so driven by projects. General fund and HHS, they're really driven by personnel. And so that's why you see that difference there. 2023 to 2024, there's a $1 million increase in expenses. And like in the general fund, I do have a note there. So there's a $2.1 million increase in expenses in the general fund, of which 1.7 million of that is salaries, which does include additional staff as well. So it's very driven by salaries in the general fund and really HHS.
Kelly, so on the slide with thumbs up, thumbs down, there are $3.7 million of highway construction.
Yeah,
New spending or additional spending?
well, just how it lands in the categories,
Because it doesn't
right,
tie back.
right, to the overall budget.
Okay.
So just to show the top 10 non-debt expenditures. So of course, our number one expense is salaries and benefits. And so you can see how much that's changing from 2023 to 2024. Our road and bridge construction, that is showing that $3.6 million. And Dave, that's really why that's in that neutral, because yes, it's going down, but we shouldn't get excited that we're going to have $3.6 million less of expenditures in highway, because that's all state dollars. Out of home placements is our third top expenditure overall. Major equipment purchases. And again, on that table, you can see 2023 to what's proposed for 2024. Our medical services in our jail, with computer agreements, library, food and beverage in the jail, our utilities, and then equipment repair services in the highway department. So that's, if you look at overall big chunks of money, where does our money go? There's a lot of little things after that, of course, when you add this up, you're not anywhere close to the $54 million total, but this is the big chunks. Our debt, so we have those three bonds that we are paying on annually. And so I do show where our balance currently is, will be on 12/31 of 23. All of our bond payments have been paid this year. So that's really our balance now as well, which is $17.9 million. In 2024, we will pay almost $2.4 million of bond payments. And then you can see the next column of how much of that is actual principal that's being paid off. And then the rest is interest. And the payoff years, which 2031 has always seemed so far away, but yet it's feeling closer and closer. And also with our interest rates, it's interesting because a year ago, probably a year and a half ago, I had gotten a report from Ellers, that's our financial advisors, of when that 2015 jail bond, we can call it in 2027, we will probably want to call it and then refund it because interest rates were so low. But now our 3 to 4% interest rate's looking really good. So we'll see when that one comes, when we could call it and do the refunding of what things are sitting in 2027. But right now it would be a really bad idea.
Kelly, can you go back? Can you go back once? There you go. I'm just. So if we look at the yearly amount that we pay in interest, and we subtract the half of 400,000 that we're going to make in interest, that lowers our interest payment by considerable percentage points.
If you look at it that way, yes.
Yeah. So we made pretty good money. Not made money, but we saved money by really just because of what the economy has done.
Right. So then when we put the entire budget together, our revenue and our expenditures, currently our expenditures exceed our revenue by $1.1 million. You can kind of see where those are off a little bit when you look at those major funds. So like the general fund, for example, your revenue exceeds your expenditures by like $800,000. HHS is slightly off. Road and Bridge is balanced, but there is that $250,000 extra revenue in Road and Bridge right now for that tax levy increase. And so these are the major funds. Of course, there's other funds like our debt funds and our election fund and things, but these are where the big dollars go and where we're sitting. So just an overview of county departments, looking at those that really have staff and employees and how much new dollars those departments are going to need in their 2024 budget. So I have them from most to least. So the first column there says new dollars. So that is how much money they need to balance their budgets. The next column is their salary and benefits increase that's calculated in the budget. So for example, in the jail, he needs $485,000 more in 2024. 467,000 of that is salaries right off the bat. And so really it's a very small increase when you look at things that he has control over in 2024. And that's why I have that salary list there, because really salaries, unless we're going to cut people, it is what it is. I do have notes. There's some that have stars by them, and those are where there are changes to employee counts proposed. And so that is somewhere that we could consider that maybe that salary increase doesn't need to be as much. So at the top of the list, the assessor, that includes the appraisers going from 37.5-hour work weeks to 40-hour work weeks. That's just strictly needed to meet the demand of their positions and the amount of work that needs to happen. This is a way around asking for yet another staff. And this is only a $25,000 increase. Dispatch, there is one additional part-time person included in there. Auditor treasurer, it's proposing taking my part-time position, making it full-time. And we'll dig into that some more when I get to that budget. Extension looks really bad. It looks like we've got a $46,000 increase in extension. However, 44,000 of that is wages that previously were in the administrator budget that we are now putting in the extension budget for that administrative assistant. So previously it was always budgeted under administrator because it potentially did cross duties, but now with that position being solely focused on extension, it made sense to move that position to the extension budget. Other things to highlight when you get to the bottom of the list, probation, for example. You see that they need $321,000 less this next year to operate than they did last year. And really that comes down to that additional probation aid. And probation within that, he even does have an additional agent list in there. Same with sheriff. So sheriff, he is needing $130,000 less in 2024 to operate. And he has a huge number for salary increases, which does include a lieutenant. But yet he's still needing less dollars in 2024 to operate. But with that one, it's just a reminder that that's a one-time fix.
That's
Let's
for
say it
that
was at
1 year,
110,
then we have to know we're gonna get that extra $500,000 basically for the following year.
Right. So you're just kicking the can,
Right,
but at least it's not this year.
right.
So when you say less money, it's less levy money needed. It's not less spending on the bottom line.
Right. So it's new money that's needed from what we previously. This slide used to say new levy dollars, but then I struggle a little bit with that because like county program aid helps to offset some of this and our interest helps offset some of this. So I didn't want to call it completely new tax dollars that are needed.
Just to like probation's budget is not going down.
Right.
300.
Yeah. They have this new revenue that takes up some of their expenses.
And this is the revenue earlier.
Right.
Yeah, so if you write that earlier chart, really ties back to what you see on the bottom of this chart with sheriff and probation getting that new aid.
Right, that they no longer need other revenues. Elections, I will touch on that when we get to the elections budget, but we do have 2 temporary staff included in there and 6 election judges, and we'll dig into that as we get to the election budget, but yet with elections, I'm only asking for $3,000 of new dollars because we've worked really hard to create a elections fund balance, and so this is our first year we actually get to use it. So that's exciting. So if we called her done today, we just, all right, we're good to go. This shows where we are short on funds and how much new funds we would need to bring in. So you have a choice of how you want to balance the budget. Do I want to balance it with tax levy? Do I want to balance it with cuts and expenses? Do I think there's revenues we're not capturing? What is it? But if you said, I just want to be done, we're going to fill this gap with tax levy. Your total between all of the places that need additional funds would be almost $1.2 million or a 5.6% levy increase, which is the smallest number I think I've brought to you since I've been auditor treasurer to start with. Those new revenues really have helped out. And I know Steve really likes how much does 1% get us? So that's their 212,700.
All right, thank
Did your
you.
numbers change from this?
Oh, yep. So HHS did some additional work. Yep. So Becky did some additional work. So you'll notice her bubble is significantly less, which created the total significantly less.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So Kelly, how is our growth as far as housing? Year ago stuff that might be coming on board.
Yeah.
I don't need the number, but was there some?
And so you always think, oh, there's been all this construction. We've got all this new tax capacity that we can levy on. However, when values are increasing so much, the percentage ends up to be not so exciting. So we're at about 1% new construction. So in essence, you have 1% of things that you didn't have to levy against last year. So you could do a 1% levy increase, and in theory, no one's taxes would go up, even though we know that doesn't work because people's values change at different rates and things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just a history of our levy. So back to 2011, I show where our levy was and where we are as of 2023 and the different percentages that we have levied over the years from the year before. You can see in 2011, we were sitting in a really rough place with our unrestricted general fund balance. And so we had a couple more years there where we luckily did add to the fund balance, however, we're very flat. But that $801,000 really got there because there were many years before that were also at 0% and they were spending fund balance. So starting in 2014, I think the board has been very cognizant of we need to grow this fund balance. We need to be ready for when there's a catastrophe and we can actually respond to it. And so you can see as the years have gone on, we had some years of some significant levy increases, but we are sitting in a much better place with our general fund unrestricted balance.
In 2022.
Yeah, so I looked and we had a lot of departments that were slightly over. We had a lot of departments that were slightly under, and those all kind of washed. The 2 big ones that ended up to be over were our courthouse utilities, which the price of our natural gas went insane. And so that was about 100,000 of that. And then sheriff's office salaries is about 300,000 of that. And so the state auditor's office, which we're going to end up finishing our audit really soon. And so they'll remind us that they like to see counties having a 35 to 50% fund balance of their operating expenditures. And they, back in 2014, when we were looking, or 2013, when we were looking at that, that didn't seem very attainable at all. So the board did pass a policy and a goal of having a 20 to 35% fund balance, which seemed more attainable. As of 2022, we're sitting at 23%, which is down from 2021 at 26%.
How do you feel about that 23% number?
We're barely eking by our goal.
But as far as cash flow, when projects come in and they have to be paid for, and every 2 weeks we got to pay our employees, we're okay.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And if the boiler dies, we could buy a new boiler and still be okay.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's a balance we have to recognize. I mean, it's like we don't need to be a bank, but people expect that we're going to be fiscally sound enough to take care of our own troubles if something does happen.
Yeah, so do you remember, Steve, when we set that goal of the 20 to 35, I remember that.
I
Discussion, but
remember
I don't remember if we were made a hard bottom on 20%,
Well, and it's a goal.
Yeah.
I think it was a goal that at the time we set it almost seemed unobtainable. I mean, really, because where were we then, Kelly?
We were at 6%.
At 6%. So to go from 6% to 20% seemed to be like, how is that ever going to happen? We can't hardly make ends meet now. But we were diligent and we just budgeted for it and we held to it. And we've got there. I would certainly feel more comfortable with a 25% at the end when everything is done than 22.5%.
Yes.
But it's still a lot of money in our checkbook because the percentage, I mean, the dollar amount has to keep going up to keep pace with our increase in our budgets.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know what the perfect number is, Matt. I think we all have our own comfort zone. I think we really have to rely on staff with Kelly and David and the people that crunch all the numbers for us to make sure that they feel comfortable.
That's just,
to meet the needs that we have, and we have to listen to them.
Yeah, everything costs more, so
Yeah, I think, if we remember back when Mark gave his presentation of highway and he's asking for a $250,000 increase in his levy. And, they buy the same amount of parts that they always have. Virtually the same amount of parts. And that number has just doubled in the last 5-6 years. So we can't ignore that. We need parts to keep that machinery running.
thanks for those comments, Steve.
Another piece of the fund balance that I wanted to highlight are restricted funds. So that fund balance we were talking about on this sheet is literally our unrestricted funds that we can spend on government services that we need to spend it on. However, we have funds that are also sitting in our bank that we can only spend on certain things. And so there's a total of just over $2 million of that type of fund as of 12/31/2022. And you can see the major ones listed here. I think the board and staff have really focused on trying to spend those fund balances before asking for tax levy dollars when we can use them. And so between 2021 and 12/31/2022, that is down $550,000. So
What is AIS again?
aquatic invasive species.
And what is the cross?
McVie.
Yeah,
That's the home visiting.
okay,
Becky's going to talk about that.
okay. Thank you.
So I just like to highlight these because these are ones that I know I focus on in my budgets, because if we can spend these dollars before we're asking for new dollars, that's great. But sometimes some of these things have a balance for a reason. For example, with the Recorder's Compliance Fund, you look at that and go, you had $300,000 in there? Well, that was to pay for the new property tax system. And so when we get to my recorder budget, I'll show you what it looks like now.
Yeah.
Other items to note, this provides stable funding for our partner organizations such as Historical Society, Egg Society, and Initiative Foundation. We have removed the budgets for the Snake River Watershed Board and the HRA. Those are very small numbers, but those are just changes within the general fund I wanted to highlight. So the HRA, we've moved them over to a fiduciary account, and we are going to manage their funds, and they're going to pay their own expenses because they have a bank account to do that with. Increased fleet purchases by a significant amount. Mark will dig into that as to what that amount is and why. I think I have a typo there. That should be 460. Increase in the technology fund levy. So some years back, we created this fund for technology. The main thing we paid for out of it was the sheriff's office RMS system. And so since then, we've only been levying $25,000 a year in it. And at this point, it would seem like with some of our technology needs, we should be increasing that. So there's a request to increase that by $50,000 up to $75,000 every year. My last bullet point there apparently has typos in it, but it just notes that there's within the budget, there is already proposed use of restricted funds and fund balances, and you'll see those as we work through the different budgets. That's also not on your slides that you've got there.
Where was the other typo? Other than the bottom one wasn't on here?
The increases in the fleet purchases should be 460, not 560.
I don't have that one.
Oh, I can go back.
50 on the bottom for restricted funds.
That is not the right number. I don't have that number. So as we work through the budget, things to consider is those have a detailed review of the department level requests. Sometimes it's important to look at those line items and what is included in that line item and how much is actually needed, because some of those line items end up to be very big numbers. There's obviously the consideration of the budget has some proposed additional staff. And if you don't do that, that's savings right off the bat. Use of restricted funds. I've kind of hammered on that in recent slides, but just making sure we're using those when we can, when we're trying to balance the budget. If we're really looking for a low tax levy, do we want to look at cuts to existing programs? I don't know that any of us want to go down that road, but it's always an option. There is a consideration of ARPA. Are there expenditures we could move over to ARPA? Do we need to do an ARPA transfer again this year? However, then there's things on that project list we're not going to be able to do. But we do still have that resource should we really need it. And then, of course, our last line of defense would be to do a levy increase. All right, so that's the end of my general county overall budget. Questions?
No, and it's laid out nice. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right.
We got lots to think about.
Yeah. Are you ready to jump into my department budgets? I think it will take about an hour. I don't know if you want to take a break.
Need a break? Oh, let's go.
Okay, we'll go.
I
So
took a
in-
break.
All right, thanks, Steve. So in your packets, I do have my individual spreadsheets for each department. in there that shows every line item and shows the budgeted amount. However, and I've walked you through those spreadsheets every year, and by about the third one, it gets a little exhausting. And so I have those spreadsheets in your packet should you want to look at them. However, I have all the departments broken down on slides, so we'll kind of just focus on the slides. And then if you have questions beyond that, just let me know. So we're going to start with the auditor treasurer budget. When we look at that between last year and this year, we need an additional almost $81,500 to operate. And I know some people like percentages, even though I don't. And so I put the percentage on there that would be an 11% increase from what we needed what we spent last year. But yet I just caution with percentages because it's relatively small numbers that you're looking at. So of that increase, that is made up of changes to revenues and expenditures. And you're going to see that as I go through all of my department budgets is sometimes we've got increased revenues, like in this case, we're anticipating that the auditor's fees will take in more $2,500 more in 2024 than we did in 2023. And so that additional revenue will help offset some of those additional expenses, the $83,999 of additional expenses. So of those things, those additional expenses that I've highlighted on here, the major one that I have listed is the change from a part-time staff to a full-time staff. So in the middle of 2022, I had a resignation of a full-time staff. And at that time, the reporting was starting to slow down, and that position processes deeds and mortgages, that it was slowing down, and just overall within the department, I felt like we could bump that position down to part-time. And that has been fine. And so in 2023, that's fine. However, in 2024, we have three significant elections. We have the presidential primary election in March. We have the general or the August
Primary election for everybody but the president, and then we have the general election in September.
And that might sound like, well, those are just short little times. However, the absentee voting period starts 6 weeks before that. And then there's like 2 weeks of prep before that. So it really, one election ends up running into the next. And within our office, we have a significant amount of just general work, getting things ready for the polling places, but also with absentee and mail voting type activities. Yeah, if I think back to 2020, I said to my staff, I can't do that again. We need to do something different. So had there not be these elections next year, I would say, yep, let's keep it part-time. This is working. But with those elections, I would really ask that we move it back to full-time, which is really what it was in forever. Existing staff and benefits. So regardless of that change of that position, if we just had kept our existing staff and benefits as they are today, that's already a $41,000 increase. So that one's just, unless you're going to cut staff, that's just what it is. And then I've just got various other increases and some decreases listed. Postage is kind of a painful thing. So the majority of our postage budget comes from when we mail out the property tax statements. And it is just, even though postage, it seems like, oh, it only goes up 2 cents. Well, when you're sending 24,000 envelopes out, that 2 cents and adds up fast. And so postage increasing, our advertising, legals, and subscriptions. So our big advertising we do is the delinquent tax list. And that's literally about $30,000 a year. And just, we've seen the length of the list makes it more expensive, and just overall costs are more expensive with that advertising. Our independent auditing, so that is through the state auditor's office. And really, when I look at the historical expenditures, we've been under budgeting in that line item for what it's costing us. So that's really just bringing it to what we've already been spending. Copier, we got a new copier. The lease on it is slightly more than the old one. So that's that increase. Room and board, I'm saying we could decrease $250. We don't have a lot of overnight travel. So I think the budget I left, I think would get us one overnight travel, which maybe we'd end up with that. Mileage, asking to increase it by $250, which is some of that room and board of, rather than staying overnight, we might be driving. Office supplies, just asking to decrease the $1,000. And that is because anyone that's been to our office and seen our paper receipt books, we literally hand write out these carbon copy receipts. And probably about September 1st, we are going to run out of those paper receipts gladly. And we are going to be switching to an electronic system. So those literally cost us about $1,000 a year. But we don't need them anymore. And then printing expense, just with costs of printing the tax statements are slightly more. Questions on that auditor treasurer budget?
I don't think so.
All right, truth and taxation budget. So right now, like this is where I don't like percentages. It's an overall increase of $1,600, but yet it's a 20% increase. So don't focus on that 20%, it's $1,600. And the big change in the truth and taxation is that supplemental piece that had to go with the truth and taxation notices. So last year when you had your truth and taxation notice, it was a regular one. And then there was this other page behind it that the legislature required us to do, and it broke down like all of our entire budget, the school's budgets, the city's budgets, and it literally doubled the cost of printing, and it increased postage too, because then you're having some envelopes that should have, people who could have only gotten one envelope, but now they had to get two because there was too much in that one. So these increases are based on that. However, last week after I put this together, then I got a positive note on a legislative change that they decided this year it can actually go on the back of the truth and taxation notice. So it's not going to be a second page. So I think I will end up revising these numbers a little bit, but it's $1,600. That was one good piece of legislation, but
There's some craziness that it has to be on one, to have separate sheets, which is
Right.
that they state, it just makes no sense.
right. So now they said we can put it on the back,
Yeah.
which is great. We thought we were going to get calls from people on it last year, and I think we got one. Mostly, I think people looked at it and thought, I don't know what that is.
This is, yeah.
Aquatic invasive species budget, so that's that AIS, Terry. So that is a completely grant funded program. And so our revenues aren't going to change. That comes from the state through the grant, through the legislative appropriation. So that stays very stable from year to year. Typically, we just budget our expenses to match those revenues. So next year, our salaries are going to go up $527. So in order to balance out, we're going to spend $527 less in program expense.
So I have a question going back to the 48 hours. So I have sick time now if I'm an aquatics
Yeah,
species person. So if I decide not to use any of that time, I don't call in sick or anything, they don't automatically get an additional 48 hours, correct? It's only if,
well, they can keep accruing up to 80 hours.
It can
Or like-
carry
over from year to year.
but it does not have a cash value.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thanks.
So AIS also, if we don't spend all of our revenues in a given year, they add to a restricted fund balance, which you saw back on that slide. So I have a history of what that fund balance has been year to year. So you can see since 2020, we've actually been spending more each year than what new dollars we've been bringing in. And in the usually January, February of every year, Caleb will bring to you the AIS plan for the year and show you, this is what we'd like to spend the dollars on. And this is how much reserves we're going to end up using, or this is how much we're going to add to the reserves. Those projects, the big parts of that program is treatment on certain lakes through lake associations that they do for like milfoil and curly leaf. So this is an easy budget because it's grant funded. It has a nice fund balance, and you will review it again in the winter.
Yeah, it really helps the lake associations. too.
Right. Recorder budget. So overall, there is a $45,000, almost $46,000 increase from last year that we're going to need. Which again, my percentages, that's a 47% increase, which looks terrible. But we'll walk through what that really is. So recording fees, our number of recordings in general is significantly down. It's about half of what it was. And so with that, we're going to be taking in less dollars of recording fees. So I'm estimating we're going to lose about we'll have about $25,000 less in revenue next year. And then our expenses are going to change slightly as well. Our existing staff wages and benefits will be increasing $21,000, and that is what it is unless we wanted to make changes there. And then we just have minor changes on other items, some minuses and some pluses. But even though you look at, the expenses are only going up $20,000, but then we have $25,000 less of revenue to pay for those expenditures. So that's how you get that overall increase now of $45,000.
Kelly,
Yeah.
Steve here, are there recent trends like in the last couple of months that there is more activity going on, or is it mostly, I know we did a lot of recordings because people refinanced like crazy.
They're not
And-
refinancing anymore at 7
No.
something percent.
Right, but people still need to borrow money and stuff.
Right.
So there's just the norm. Are we back to the old normal numbers?
We're probably back to the pre-COVID numbers.
Okay,
In the recorder's office, we also have those 2 significant restricted funds. So the recorder compliance fund, that's $10 on every single document that's recorded goes in this compliance fund. And it can be used for the assessor's office, the recorder's office, and the auditor treasurer office to make sure for anything property related, really. And so I have a historical balance showing. I have really my kind of budget that I do for that fund, that restricted fund, to show you where that's going to be. So like I said, 12/31/2022, we had almost $300,000. However, with paying for that new property tax system and other expenditures that are planned, I'm thinking by the end of 2023, we'll be at about $69,000. And by the end of 2024, it'll be pretty stable with essentially spending what we bring in 2024. The recorder technology fund, so that's $11 on every single document that's recorded. And this is a lot, the table's a lot larger on that one. But you can see where our historical balances have been. The recorder technology fund can literally only be spent on technology for the recorder's office. And so Ryan and I work kind of hard to pay for things out of there that are for the recorder's office, but may also benefit other departments, but are primarily for the recorder's office. So that really has taken some pressure off the IT budget over the years. As you can kind of see, like in 2023, we did the electric upgrade to the uninterruptible power system out of there. Because if the recorder's office were down, that would not work for our local title companies and attorneys, and it would make a whole sector of business just stop if the recorder's office was down. So like that, we paid for it out of the technology fund. So you can kind of see the things that we pay out of there. It's a whole big list. So it's kind of hard to look at. But overall, you can see, I mean, in 2017, we were sitting at $219,000 and it was kind of sitting pretty stable. And then post-COVID, you can kind of see Ryan and I spending it down. But at least those things were not needing to be paid with the tax levy, because those are dollars that come in and we're really restricted on how we can spend them. Questions on that? All right, assessor budget. So when we were looking at the top 10 revenues in the general fund, one of the things that showed was that the assessor's office was going significantly down. And yes, in 2024, their revenues are going to be down about $30,000. But that's expected in that our contracts with those townships and cities literally decrease $1 a year. So for 2024, there's $25,000 worth of revenue that is just contracted to go away. And that was our intention. That was our plan.
How many townships or cities do we still have that are doing local assessors?
One,
Okay, good.
yeah. And then we also picked up a new jurisdiction. So while those others are going down, we picked a new one up that helps bring in some additional revenue. So that's 4,881. And actually on Friday, then we picked up another one. So this number's outdated. We got Mission Creek on Friday.
Okay.
So that's exciting. So that'll be a little bit better help. That's only 500 parcels. So that's probably another $4,000 worth of additional revenue that'll be coming.
Eventually this will be gone.
Right. Eventually, I think it was the board's intention for it to just be gone. And really, that's how most counties operate in the true county assessor system, and they don't charge their jurisdictions. Either way, it's property tax dollars. It's just whose pocket are they coming out of, the township, cities, or the counties?
Kelly, what is the per parcel charge?
So they vary by township based on commercial property breakdown and residential breakdown and bare land breakdown. So it's hard. It's somewhere. So like the new jurisdiction that we brought it on at $8 a parcel. But some of the ones that have been with us for a while and have seen that decrease, I think we've got Clover down at $4 a parcel.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then overall, looking from one budget to the next, I am not sure where that 2023 revenue number came from, because it just does not match. And so overall, just our revenue is going to be $9,500 less, because last year that revenue number was artificially inflated for some reason. So overall, when you take all those things into consideration, we end up with about $30,000 less of revenue to pay for our expenditures.
And you said that the 37.5 hours to 40 hours is to get the job done, but not to hire new employees. So
Right.
at $35,000 or $25,000 versus what would
About 60 for an additional appraiser. And so that's something that the union has agreed to, going to that 40-hour work week. And I mean, when you do that for all of the appraisers, you end up getting like 25.5 hours additional in a week of work hours between all of them. But still, it really adds up and really helps get that work done with all of these new jurisdictions coming on. Our existing staff and wages, so regardless, outside of that change from 37.5 hours to 40 hours, we would just right off the bat have a almost $53,000 just based on wages and benefits for our existing staff at their regular hours. Overall, you can kind of see changes in the different line items. I want to highlight the conference training registrations and the room and board. So we brought on 2 new staff over the last couple of years who are not licensed assessors. And so over the next 3 years, we have to take them through the licensing process. And so that's like a total of 6 classes at about $500 each that they have to take. And some of those end up far away. So then they end up having to stay in a hotel. And so that's why you're seeing those proposed increases there, because we have a statutory obligation to get those people licensed. So overall, assessor's office budget ends up going up about $115,000. Zoning. So zoning overall increase about from last year to this year is $25,000. In our revenues, we're proposing to be down about $4,000. We have a new septic special assessment that came on, so that was a new revenue. But then we had a couple of decreases in our state aid amounts. And the state aid amounts are a little bit goofy because our regular grants are what they are from year to year. However, the one that changes is our low income septic grant. And so I just sent in the application last week for 2024. So we don't know how much we're going to get there, but whatever we get in money from there, we spend. So it ends up to be neutral. Refunds and reimbursements, I am saying it will go down about $2,500. So in 2023, we budgeted because we were doing some staff time that we're doing projects for the One Watershed One plans. However, those projects that we had in those One Watershed One plans are coming we're finishing them. And so we will have less reimbursement for our staff time from those things. Unless new projects come up, which we'll see. Our expenses change, existing wages and benefits. So that's no new staff, nothing changing. That's $19,500 right off the bat. And then just like changes to mileage and office supplies. All right. Solid waste gets a little busy. So the solid waste budget needs $40,000 new between 2024 and 2023, which again, I don't like percentages because that's a 57% difference between last year and this year. So last year we needed about $40,000. This year we need about $80,000. So it's very small numbers. In the solid waste budget, we have revenues that will be increasing from 2023 to 2024 that will help offset some of those increased costs. So the SCORE grant, so that is our grant that we get from the state for providing recycling services. And so that in legislation this year ended up, the calculation got better for us by almost $16,000. So that's a very stable revenue from year to year to year. It was $83-ish thousand for a long time, and now it's going to $99,000. So that's exciting. Our household hazardous waste grant, that grant, so the state looks at how much household hazardous waste we bring in to our facilities. And then they have some crazy calculation that Caleb and I can't figure out on how they come up with a grant amount after that, based on what we spent and what we collected. In looking at past years, so for 2023, I knew this was going to be our first year that we had the Willow River one open. And so I had kind of just doubled the amount from last year. But it doesn't appear that's what's going to happen, even though we have two and probably taking in about double. So just thinking to bring that down just $2,000. Fees for service between the transfer stations, we're thinking we'll end up bringing in about an additional $6,000 just based on volume of people going in there. And then I already spoke about that solid waste assessment in that revenue is increasing. It's not that you guys did anything. It's just that new parcels were made from splits and plats and things like that, or mobile homes that came. On the expenditure side, it is a whole busy list, but things to highlight is we've got our existing staff wages and benefits. So this isn't proposing anybody new. This is just paying for what we currently have, which part of all of our zoning office salaries are paid out of here because they all do a little bit solid waste too. But then we have our 5 transfer station attendants, and then 4 household hazardous waste seasonal folks too that are paid out of here. So that's a total of $22,500. I should highlight the bond payment because that's something different that you don't see in any of the other budgets. So when we did that refunding of the courthouse bond in 2020, part of that bond was used to pay for the HHW and Willow River. Apparently, state statute says when bond funds are used for solid waste operations, the solid waste operations have to pay that portion of the bond. So every single year since we started paying on that bond, you've seen this transfer outline in the solid waste budget. And that's literally the portion of that 2020 bond that solid waste is paying. So this year it's going down $472. Overall, things are pretty stable. I do want to highlight the North Pine, that in the expenses area, the second column, the very top thing, the North Pine transfer station refuge removal. So that's going down $5,000, and that's thanks to the purchase of the skid loader compacting things. And so we're able to get more in a dumpster, and we are seeing great success with that. And so that $5,000 is probably a little bit conservative at this point because we've only had it the skid loader for a short time. But and then the program expense, I wanted to highlight that because I wanted to make the North Pine transfer station and the South Pine transfer station have the same program expense. And so North Pine was budgeted a lot less in 2023 than South Pine. But overall, that program expense is just buying things that we need at the transfer station, whether that's the driveway washed out. Now we need to get someone to come in and fix the driveway, or the snowplow ruined this area. Now we need to fix it. And so those transfer stations, well, they're set up very well and they don't need a lot. They still do need things. And so that just gives us a budget to work with in there and gives them similar budgets to work within. Otherwise, the other big one I wanted to highlight was the recycling contract at $39,700 increase. So that is our recycle sheds. So the Bruno and then the sites at our transfer stations and the Hinckley transfer station. So we had lots of conversation on that this winter. And so the board had approved that new contract with our hauler at Cloquet Recycling. And within our contract, we have just a planned increase based on CPI. And so looking at where that currently is, this is the increase. That's not just the entire increase because of the CPI. That's because in 2023, we're under budgeted for what we're paying. So the increase because of the CPI was only about 5,000 of that. Questions on that?
Do we have it set up to talk more about the recycling plant or the sheds in Bruno? I mean, Caleb had talked about things that we could do to make it so we didn't get so much garbage, like the lighting systems or.
Right, yeah, and we're chipping away at those things.
Okay.
So my non-departmental budget, so in the general fund, we have this non-departmental budget, the 801. And so this just pays for, it's all of our revenues that help pay for everything in the general fund that isn't department specific. And then it's a kind of our costs that also aren't department specific. So overall, in the non-departmental, we're gonna end up seeing about $29,000 more in revenue in 2023 than we were in 2024. And it kind of lists out where those changes are. You've your big ones, your forfeited property is no longer, it's going away. But your county program aid is coming up. The tribal sales tax agreement, so that had a huge dip in 2020 and now it's been nicely gaining back. And so I feel comfortable with budgeting a little bit more there. Otherwise, plat books, for example, I'm saying will go down just because in 2023 we had a new plat book. So a lot of people came in and bought it, but now it will be a year old. So the sales will slow down. Yeah, and then you see like that ARPA transfer also is no longer available. So overall, when you do all those pluses and minuses, you end up with $29,000 more in 2023 than 2024.
It's not much.
Question. So is there something set in stone yet on the forfeited property, or are we just playing this?
We're playing it safe. So I don't know if you want to.
Well, I was gonna say, we're playing it safe, but that means we're following the law, right?
No, I know, but I meant, yeah.
We can't.
Well, there was no real guideline set, was there?
Well,
The guideline,
takings clause of we can't keep more than what was owed to us. But yet there's so much of that that's unanswered of how far back does that go? If we're selling a property that forfeited 80 years ago, do we literally have to go try to find the heirs of those people, or how far is it going to go? And with like our timber sales, is that still okay? And so the courts are working through that. I'm on a committee with AMC to work on legislative proposal changes to it. So at this point, it would seem reasonable not to put anything in there.
But see, that was a building with some, so with land and the land just, so if they paid off what they paid off with all that, then there'd still be leftover sale, right?
Right,
Or their equity or whatever you want to say. So that's what I'm talking about.
right.
What happens after they have paid their equity and you make a sale for what the highest bidder might be way more money? It's that.
That's the question at hand.
That's what I'm saying, where I'm
Right.
referring to. It doesn't mean we have to sell it cheaper.
We don't know yet.
No.
We still put it out on bids, but so it make the person whole with what he paid off, or does he get the profit?
it doesn't matter what the sale price is. It doesn't matter what might be owed to a mortgage or a lien holder. The county cannot keep excess proceeds. right?
Well, I thought it was that belonged to the owner, the equity. That's where I thought what the gray area was. So then,
I don't think their equity has anything to do with it. It's,
that's what they've paid off. That's the taking clause.
right,
Yeah, how much was it worth on the day it forfeited?
yeah.
And now it's 3 years later and market values have gone up. So I think Matt's getting to, well, what about the value increase we got for holding it
Or decrease, I mean, because that goes both ways.
right, or the expenditures we have to clean up some of these properties.
I just want to say that, I think it's great that Pine County moved forward and kept, still did the forfeitures and still did the sales and did everything else, whereas other counties just stopped everything. We kept moving forward with that.
Right.
So, the fact that we moved forward, we're not going to get stuck with all this stuff to do in years. We were still able to sell it.
Yeah, we're just not gonna do that apportionment part, put in the funds in escrow till we get direction.
I was really surprised that some counties didn't move forward with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think that's resolved yet.
no,
No, I
do
think
have
it's a
an
long
easy
way
question,
off.
though. Not related. The power line tax decrease, what is that?
yeah. So in 2023, well, so take you a little further back. If you remember from, I think that was 2021-ish, we had this whole revelation that we had been doing power line taxes incorrectly, as Department of Revenue had told us to do, which apparently was not according to statute. So we had this whole change of, okay, these small cities, you're actually not going to get a part of the power line taxes. It's only going to be the county and the school districts that get a part of the power line taxes. So in 2023, that was the first year that we had that benefit. And so I did my best guess of what it was going to be. And I was $29,000 too high. And so now we know because we've done it.
Thank you.
All right, so on the non-departmental budget, there are some expenses as well that go through that non-departmental budget just because it's not specific to any department. So the county pays a share of certain retirees' health insurance. And that has seen a significant increase due to some workers' comp type retirements and disability things. We're having to pay some significant health insurance towards some of those folks who are no longer with us. So that no longer work for us. And so we've seen a significant increase there. Our workers' comp costs are just going up because it is. Our AMC and NACO dues is going up, but it's not really going up. So previously our AMC dues were split between the general fund, highway, and HHS. And we kind of came to the realization that maybe that doesn't make sense. Why not just pay it out of the general fund? So that's what that is just paying that entire AMC dues out of the general fund. Automobile insurance. So this is kind of a goofy thing. So every year MCIT does a review of your changes during the year of vehicles you took off, vehicles you put on, and then they give you this aggregate amount of how much more you owe us or how much we owe you. And so this has been happening over the last couple of years, and it's generally always cost us something. And so we pay it out of the 801 because we're not going to go through and go, well, that was $4 to the sheriff's office and $12 here. So we've just been paying it out of the non-departmental fund. But yeah, we've never budgeted for it. So it would make sense to budget for it. And then the tax abatement is going down $5,500. So previously we had the tax abatement on the clinic here in Sandstone. And so we had to budget $7,000 for that every year. In that they got $7,000 back from the county taxes every year. That was done last year. So now moving forward, we actually have the new one coming on of the apartments in Pine City.
Timber Pines.
No,
One's by the
the
village.
ones by the village. What is it called? Leslie? Oh, the village apartments.
Okay,
So it's the village apartments. And so our tax abatement on that one, so on the clinic, it was kind of nice because it was just a flat $7,000 a year. On the village apartments, I like it because We get to keep some of the new taxes it generates, but it's just 95% of the new taxes it generates. So for 2024, the building is like only 30% done. So that's only like $2,000 of tax abatement they're gonna get back.
So the nursing home in Pine City, are they looking at doing an abatement to that? Did it pass? Is it going to be part of the college initiative?
Yes, they are pursuing both abatement and TIF for that. And I don't know that they are at the point where they are ready to come to the county. The county can make a decision on abatement or not. If they do TIF, the city can decide that, and then the county just gets the information. So it is in the works.
So the city did approve that they can use it for.
I know there was.
There's
I believe they gave them the go-ahead, Terry.
Okay, good.
But I think the details, like a TIF district or something, are still in the works.
Well, I'm glad that they're moving forward with that. They need that house.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we're turning away students because we don't have anywhere for them to, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
So overall, in the non-departmental budget, you've got revenues going up, but you've got expenses going up. So the net difference between those is about $20,000. So that kind of is the catch-all at the end of the budget. Moving into my next budget, which was the land fund, which I left towards the end of when I was working on budgets, because I was like, I don't know what to do. So what I did was, in general, I moved forward like normal. However, I removed that tax forfeit land sale portion. So in the revenues, I am changing that by $258,000. Again, these are all just such unknowns, but the land fund has it has never used any levy dollars. It has its own fund balance. So it's a little okay that there's a kind of a big question mark there somewhat, because I am hopeful that we're at least going to be able to recoup our administrative costs. So revenues, I'm taking some of those away. Expenditures, so our existing staff, not proposing any changes, but that just goes up 14,800 based on wages and health insurance. And then we have a few other changes. Of course, we get down to the bottom of that apportionment to other, we're still going to have a land sale. And so I was struggling a little bit with, what do I do? Because right now we have this line that says apportionment to other, which is our apportionment out to the townships and cities. And then we have this line that says intergovernmental payments, which is our transfer to the general fund. And so it made sense to me to, okay, get rid of the general fund payment. But I left some in the apportionment to others because really those others could be the property owners that got forfeited. So I just wanted to account for that since we will still be having a land sale. Questions on that? It's hard.
It's a hard one.
And then I did highlight the land fund, restricted funds. So we have 4 restricted funds in the land fund. The top one is the only one that will probably have an ongoing revenue source, because it gets revenues from gas tax. And so that one does have revenues that go in and revenues that go out for the forest roads. So as of 12/31, there was $53,000 in that fund. And then the timber development, the blight, and the parks. So those are funds that the board could choose in statute to set aside percentages of our proceeds to. And for the last, since about 2013-ish, we've done that pretty regularly. Some of them at pretty high percentages, and we've created these fund balances. Because of the Tyler versus Hennepin decision, we likely are not going to be able to put any money into these funds. So these funds are what they are. And they will just get spent. So right now in the budget, I've just budgeted them out at 0 because we're just going to end up spending fund balance should we spend money out of that. Elections budget. So I have a highlight of a proposed levy increase by $3,000. The levy in the elections budget has kind of gone up and then gone back down. I think at the proposed level should be where we could go year after year after year and be able to not have those highs and lows. So previously, before we did this election fund, in election year, you'd have this really high cost. And then in a non-election year, you'd have this really low cost. And so we've worked now for several years to levy an amount every single year to make it level. And then in that election year, spend fund balance. So in 2019, we thought we were going to be adding to the fund balance. However, then we had 4 special elections and we got no fund balance. So 2021, our non-election year, was our first year we finally got to add to the fund balance. And so now after 2023, we do have a balance down at the bottom. I note as of 6/30/23, we had a fund balance of 76,700. And that doesn't include second half tax settlements for this year. So we'll have a balance close to 100,000 by the end of the year. So with that, in the elections budget, I'm asking for that $3,000 levy increase. There is this new grant we're getting from the legislature called the voter account grant. It's a whopping $7,800, of which 25% we have to allocate out between the townships and cities. So that's going to be great. And then we'll get to keep 75% of it. But in general, it's just going to help pay for election expenses. Revenues on the revenue side, filing fees. So again, in an election year, we actually get filing fees when people come file for office with us. And then our refunds and reimbursements ends up bumping up because when we have the presidential primary election, the state actually reimburses all of our costs with that. So while our costs down below are increased because of that presidential primary, we'll get it back from the state of Minnesota. Along with that refunds and reimbursements, when, for example, the school district or the city has offices on the ballot, they also pay for a part of like our ballot setup and things like that. So that goes in that refunds and reimbursements as well. On the expenses side, there's about $60,000 worth of essentially new staff. They're all temporary staff. So within that, there are the 2 temp staff that I had, say similar to 2022, they're in the office helping us at the counter with people absentee voting, helping us mail ballots out, helping us just get all of the equipment ready for the polling places and things like that. And then starting in 2022, due to a court decision and the interpretation of the statute, we had to hire actual election judges to serve on our ballot board. And we did that in 2022. It actually went really well. I was very nervous on how this was going to go, but we got a great group of people and they served on the ballot board. And so that's something that we have to, by state statute, continue to do because it cannot just be staff serving on that ballot board. So and there's 6 election judges proposed in there. Typically I was having like 3 meet at a time. And so it just allows them to trade off and work with different groups of people and get different conversations going. So it worked really well, I think. It was kind of interesting because as I was figuring out hours for them, again, you have the 3 elections they're going to be serving at instead of 2. And the election volume is going to be significantly increased due to the presidential election. Also on that expense side, just you have your expenses that are going to be more in election year, postage, because we mail out a ton of ballots, ballots in general, because we actually have to buy ballots and do legal notices. Otherwise, everything is pretty similar to what it's been in the past. I mean, your office supplies, again, we have to supply those polling places with their pens and all of these different things that they need. And so it just adds up. One piece that I did take out of the budget that is a bit of a question mark for me, but I'm struggling a little bit with is this equipment purchase. So in 2022, the board authorized purchase of all new election equipment. And then last December, I had gotten a little grant of about $7,000. And so the board had authorized me to purchase 2 more tabulators for jurisdictions that previously were hand count. However, since then, Now I've gotten 2 jurisdictions that were previously mail ballot that now are going to have polling places. So now they're going to need equipment. And so there is a little bit of a question mark with the equipment stuff. I had a conversation with the state of Minnesota, and it doesn't sound like they will have any election equipment grants coming. So we may need to consider using maybe some more of that fund balance to buy some additional equipment. Questions on that?
No.
Debt service. So this is an easy one. So we've got our 3 bonds. Literally in our bond documents, it tells us exactly how much we have to levy in our bond funds. So that's what we levy because that's what we're told. It's actually 5% more than what the payments are, and that just accounts for things that you haven't collected so that you have the money to be able to pay the bond payment. Because otherwise, if we're only collecting 95% of it, well, then you'd have to be dipping in somewhere else to make it up for it. We always get the funds, but it's just a matter of when on those delinquent things. So you can kind of see where the levy increases were required to be per the bond documents and then what the bond payments are. Overall, when that all washes out, it ends up to be a $4,670 levy increase that's required there. Because some of the payments couple payments went down slightly.
So the $600 was it on the solid waste fund? Does that transfer to the CIP bond fund and then the levy amount is reduced?
It's
by that?
right. So when we look at the overall picture of everything we've just talked about over the last hour-ish, where we're at is, so the new items that we have in the budget, that if you needed to get rid of something, I guess it would be these new items probably, is that auditor treasurer staff going from part-time to full-time, which is about a $30,000 change. The appraiser is going from 37.5 hours to 40 hours a week, which is about a $25,000 change, but that's a lot cheaper than a whole new appraiser. And then the election workers, which are equal $60,000, which I would really beg you not to change. And really those election judges are required. So overall, when we look at all of the changes on the table, bottom line is all of those departments and budgets need an additional $316,309 in 2024 versus 2023 to do all of that we've talked about. That's what I got.
Any questions for Kelly?
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot to chew on.
Go ahead, JJ.
We know the numbers on logging on forfeit land. It's gone out for bids, it's sold, it's.
Right.
Could I get and it'd probably be easy to figure through Mark, LeBron and Highway Department, the amount of money in gravel that has come off of forfeit land, because there was discussion of
Right.
somebody went tax forfeit and then it was actually it turned out to be a pretty
Right.
lucrative gravel.
An amount of gravel off of tax forfeited land.
Yeah, is there any way I could get those?
The timber is super easy.
But the gravel would be,
Well, I'll maybe have to work between Mark and Greg.
I think Mark, just the amount of cubic yards, a rough estimate that's been taken on and just the tax forfeit part.
Yeah.
Any other questions? There's a lot to chew on. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
I did, thank you. So we're on to commissioner updates. Faculty committee was canceled. Labor negotiations.
Labor?
Yeah.
Well, we're negotiating. We've had a few back and forths. Nothing is really, we have tentative agreements on some things, but they're just the basic things in there. There isn't really a lot to add, and I don't want to say stuff a lot because it might change and we don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you for working on that. That's a hard one to be on. County Government 201 training, did anybody go? No? Soil and Water Conservation District.
Soil and water, I attended online, no public comment. Vandella introduced herself as the new Pheasants Forever wildlife biologist for the county. Everything else seemed pretty much business as usual over at Soil and Water. We
Okay,
got the minutes, draft minutes, in case anybody wants to read through everything. Forward.
JJ, can I add one thing? I know in my neighborhood, they're having a farm tour day type of thing on Thursday, the 17th at the Hinsey Farm, just south of Pine City, to highlight some projects that have been done and on that farm that are just a real joint collaboration between the Lower St. Croix watershed, Pine County Soil and Water, and NRCS. And I'm really happy to see that collaboration work that's done, and there's some really neat projects they've been doing. And it'll be I think it's like an open house, and they'll have people explaining what's going on. You get a hamburger and hot dog or whatever. Anyway,
bring your lawn chairs.
I
said, bring your lawn chairs.
bring your lawn chair, yeah.
I think
bring
that's
your
on the
own lawn.
packet.
Yeah.
Do you have a date? You have a date and a time for anything for that? For
Yeah,
anybody that's listening.
it's for Thursday from 4 to 7 at the Hinsey Farm. There'll be signs on Highway 61. It's a mile south of this high school in Pine City.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Kettle River.
Yes. Well, we're working on our prioritization and schedule and tables. We went through groundwater, stormwater, and recreation. We have that all. Well, it should be wrapped up by September.
Okay.
But we have to decide our governance. Are we gonna do a collaborative or a joint powers agreement? And they're gonna talk to their boards, and I don't know how you guys feel, but the policy committee will make the ultimate decision to see which way it's gonna go, and we'll see what happens. Reese gave us a presentation, so that's about it.
Okay. The library is Josh, and he's not here. East Central Solid Waste Commission.
We did have a meeting. I called into that yesterday. I think the permitting for our new cell is on track. There doesn't seem to be any hangups there. I think the interesting thing is there was a thunderstorm that came through, severe weather, I believe on Friday afternoon, and it bullseyed on the landfill west of Mora. Severe lightning strikes. So they got everybody just off the hill, and but both the packing machines, the Caterpillar and the Bomag, were struck by lightning. And so, I mean, they're these 100-ton machines with, that's what they do, is make great contact with Earth. But they're all computer driven. And so they're working, they got the Bomag back up, but the cat machine is still having some issues. So I just think it's interesting in this day and age that we would have, $1 million piece of machinery can't run because it got hit by lightning.
Wow.
It will
Steve,
run.
that was a bad storm.
Yeah.
East Central Regional Library was yesterday. The big thing that we did was we did approve the budget. And so for Pine County, we are looking at a 3.94% increase. With a total coming out of $369,600.
How much?
$369,600. And I believe that's over the amount that we paid by statute. And I do have paperwork that shows exactly how it's spent and processed and what it's utilized for, if anybody wants to look at that. It's a pretty good sheet.
And what's the statute amount again, Terry?
You have,
I can maybe
100.
So, while David's looking that number up,
56, 645, isn't it, Dave?
sounds about right.
We're at 350 something, it's going to 369.
No, the amount that the state statute says that we have to pay, that hasn't changed since like 2011.
Minimum, I don't know what.
Statute numbers.
Oh, good.
256, 664.
266.
So Sandstone Library grand opening is September 15th, which I believe is a Saturday. So that's coming up in there. I'm just really praying that it's going to be ready because they thought that they would have been opened a couple months by now and they're not opened yet. So a lot of that is, I was really surprised. Their internet, they have to have 100 up and I think it's 20 down for internet service. And it's like $364 a month for the majority of the libraries. And it's done through a contract through the state of Minnesota. So a lot of talk was, will that be able to change once with all the broadband grants? You know, people getting more money to get the broadband up and running better if we're still going to have to pay that amount of money. So that'll be interesting to see how that works. We're talking about ECRL, $3.7 million that runs the East Central Regional Library. 63% is counties. 68% of the money that is paid into the library goes to staff, which is a lot. You know, we just realized how much our staff is of our budget. So, I mean, it's the same thing. One of the things is that we may be seeing an increase in what we're going to have to pay because new libraries gets more people to go into the library systems. And so, you know, with us having a new library in Sandstone, that's going to be changing it. With our joint powers agreement, it's 1/3 tax capacity, 1/3 usage, and 1/3 something else. I can't think of what it is. But the usage will be going up with the Sandstone Library.
That's my question. How much do they set aside on their fees for their building fund and their maintenance fund?
For here?
Well, you must do all of them.
Well, for instance, this one is, we got a $1 million grant, I think it was, the city of Sandstone did to get the one here. And so we don't pay, the city of Sandstone is the one that owns it and operates it.
No, but they must have, how do they budget their building fund is what I was wondering. Because they built the new one in Cambridge too, right?
Right. So the one in Cambridge is done by the city. However, headquarters rents part of that to have the headquarters in the basement. So on the staffing and the meeting spaces.
None of the fees go to a building fund?
They probably do. And I can pull that sheet and we can look at it after if that's okay. Okay. So that's the library. Does anybody have any others?
Yeah, in the library I do.
Yes.
So then the surplus money given to the library by the state earlier, after they were, you know,
The 200,000,
that was 200,000.
right about that.
Okay, so the state gave the library 200,000 and they're raising it still 3.94%.
Right. And the majority of it does go towards salaries. So this is the breakdown of the thing. Okay, so one of the things that I thought was interesting is they did the neighbors per capita expenditures. So for Pine County, we're paying $12.11 per capita. East Central Regional Library as a whole is $11.97 per capita. If you look at Cloquet, it's $49.89. Lake is $23.83. Duluth is $55.46. And then Carlton Public Library is $22.26. So we're less than half, right around half of the lowest one that's done. So, I mean, they do a really good job of doing our money. Great Regional Library System, which is Stearns, Sherburne, Benton, Morrison, Todd, and Wright is at $17.19. And then Kichigami Regional, which is Beltrami, Cass, Crow Wing, Hubbard, and Wadena, they're at $10.71. So they are lower. So, I mean, as an idea as to what we're paying versus other places, we're doing pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but here's that paperwork for anybody that wants to peek at that. Any other questions?
No, I'm just curious to see how they set that up, not as an attack.
No. Yeah. And I didn't bring everything with, but I've got a bunch of the stuff with, so we can look and see on that. Any others? Okay, I've got a couple others. So one of them is that I sat in on the RISE meeting, which is really, to me, it's an exciting thing to be part of. We've got our schools, our sheriff's department, our probation department, our attorney's office. We have the state of Minnesota that's there. And so just to hear where everybody's at and everybody working together and seeing just that collaborative, it's pretty amazing. I do want to give a shout out. Terry did a presentation on the things that Reese and Terry have done with their departments and how they've been able to, Steve, you've talked about it, put Little Pine County on a map nationally. They are putting things for them to be asked to go with these crazy national conferences where there's these people that Terry said are, you can't kind of believe that you're sitting at the same table with them because they're doing such amazing work. So just a shout out to you guys for the things that you do. It's very appreciated. And you do such amazing things for the residents in our county and it's appreciated. So thank you for that. The JDAI is transferring to the Justice to the Metro. And I didn't even get the whole name of what it's going to be. Metro State Education, I believe, is what it's going to be now. So, and we had talked before about how we'll be able to maybe get some more grants through there. And they're just excited to work with Pine County, which is always fun to do too. And then I spent a couple of days in Duluth with the Central Minnesota Jobs and Training and just learned how we can work better. And there's a program that one of the speakers was talking about that they meet monthly it's 7 on 7. And it's working together to find out how we can get employees or what works better. And I'm getting that information. I'm going to share it with Jackie and with Leslie and see what we can do to get some ideas to get some better staffing and that type of stuff. But it was interesting hearing what other counties are doing and other agencies because it was everybody. So anybody know others? So we've got our upcoming meetings and we will adjourn this one. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Terry.
You're welcome. Keep healing, Steve.